Thank you all for having me here today and a part of this discussion. For those of you who aren't as familiar with our agency, South Coast AQMD jurisdiction covers the counties of Los Angeles, Orange County, San Bernardino, and Riverside, which actually represents about 43% of the state of California. Unfortunately, our region also includes the worst air quality in the nation. So, as chair of AQMD and the first Latina to lead this agency, creating clear skies above all communities is not just a goal, but it's how I see every policy decision. So I hold myself accountable to create equity in the air because it ties directly to my own childhood and the lived experiences of my large Mexican American family. For those of you who don't know me, and I don't think many of you know my story, my abuelito, or my grandfather, settled in Boyle Heights as a bracero coming from Zacatecas, Mexico, and eventually made it his home with my abuelita and their 10 kids. A decade later, my father made his way from Colima, Mexico, to join his brothers in Yakima, Washington, picking apples. He decided against farm working and settled in Boyle Heights to work in the factories in downtown Los Angeles, where he met my mom. Now, I know you did not come to CoMotion today to hear about my parents' love story, but the daily lives of my working class family truly informs how I understand the unintended consequences of our public policy. So more than 80% of the pollution causing our smog problem comes from more mobile sources like ships, planes, trains, and trucks. And the community that sits at that intersection between the ports and really the logistics industry is a community called Sela. And it experiences the highest level of toxic air risk from those sources. Almost all of that community is people of color. And working on that is one of AQMD's highest priorities. Warehouses and industry line the Sela community, and the trucks that pick up materials there navigate through San Bernardino County across the nation. And when we were considering the first in the nation warehouse indirect source rule last year, emissions reduction was the priority, but equally valid was my mom. My mom found a job in a warehouse packing vitamins some years ago. This job was important to her because it was one of the only hourly positions that offered full medical benefits for my parents. A few years after she began working there, my father got and beat cancer, but credits their medical benefits for giving him the ability to push for aggressive medical treatment. Keeping the jobs that employ working families like mine is an equity consideration for creating policy that advances air quality but balances our economic interests. And yes, I believe it is time to transition to zero-emission trucks. But the reality is that we do not yet have the scale of infrastructure to facilitate this goal, nor do we have the electrical grid capacity. And I can say this because I'm a retired politician. But I believe it is disingenuous to create zero-emission mandates without also coming to the table with a piece of the long-term solution to create the infrastructure we need. And these zero-emission policies must consider the equity impacts they have on small businesses and single truck owners. A diesel truck currently costs between $60,000 to $100,000, whereas a battery electric truck costs over $500,000. I tell this story, and not one of my family member stories, but a day at a construction site where we were remediating a brownfield that was next to a school. And so we were doing the work on a Saturday, so we didn't impact the children. And I polled about the 70 truck drivers that came to the site that day to see if they owned their own truck and to get a sense of where they lived. All the truck drivers that day were people of color. And one of the truck drivers that I met told me that he owned his own truck, but he accepted that Saturday work because without that overtime money, he didn't think that he would have any extra money for Christmas presents. And he said that he wouldn't see his family that weekend because he had to haul our contaminated dirt to Arizona, but he knew that he at least his kids would have presents to open that holiday. So for me, making sure that a zero-emission solution includes a path forward for that small business owner is part of our work. And the challenge is no less important to get everyone in electric vehicles. California does lead the nation in the number of electric vehicles sold. The equity issue is that as the state announced the ban of new gas-powered vehicles by 2035, low-income Californians are at risk of being left out. People like my dad. My dad eventually found a career as a commercial painter and proudly bought a yellow Toyota truck about 20 years ago to take to work. And he firmly believes that he's got 15 more years that he can keep that truck going, and maybe 20 if he stretches it. Keeping the truck for him for less time means a waste of money that he doesn't have. So I believe that it must be a goal of our programs and incentives to help working people like my dad transition to EV. Perhaps I think that public agencies could proactively partner with manufacturers to combine all of our rebates and have them bundle it for their customers. We need to find ways to make the EVs themselves affordable, but we also need to provide infrastructure to charge at home and to have fast chargers in public spaces. One of my personal goals is to find a way to model HUD's programs for weatherization, if any of you are familiar with those, but for EV infrastructure. And the premise is that the government agencies provide the funding, the requirements, and the best practices, but they hire or partner with subcontractors to implement the infrastructure upgrades in people's homes. And so I believe that we need to come up with those innovative solutions if we truly want to achieve equity as we transition. And we can do this on all scale of our programs. For example, CARB has implemented a new executive order to phase out the use of diesel lawn and garden equipment. And this is going to be great for reducing emissions, but also a health improvement for those who use the equipment all day. Luckily, CARB has made incentive programs available that allows us to subsidize 80% of the cost of the new equipment and the batteries. And we've seen a receptive adoption by public agencies and some businesses, but I worry about people like Mr. Rene. Mr. Rene helps me mow my lawn. He's probably about 60. He works alone. And I asked him if he knew about the rebate program and the fact that he could no longer use diesel equipment in a short time. And I asked him if I could help him navigate the rebate program. And in a sad turn of events, and this just happened, so I didn't intend to tell you about Mr. Rene, but he told me that his lung cancer had advanced into other organs, and he was busy dealing with that. I have no way of knowing if the diesel equipment that he's used his whole life really was a direct correlation with his cancer, but I don't want others to have that health risk or concern. So we've, at AQMD, devised an innovative program to get the word out about this rebate program in underserved areas, where we literally go into the communities and we find the gardeners where they're working. And we tell them about the program in the language of their choice, and even take them to the manufacturers or the stores where they're offering it. For me, I believe that equity is piloting innovative strategies like this to make sure that people like Mr. Rene have access to clean equipment. All right, I don't mind if you all don't remember my name after today or any of the little stories that I've shared with you, but I would like you to remember one thing. We all have a finite amount of time to make a personal legacy in the work we pursue, and the time to act is now. I consider myself lucky to be here with you today to talk about how we take Los Angeles forward into clean emissions, clean infrastructure. But I'm mindful that I have a finite amount of time to take plans into action. And keeping equity in the forefront of my mind is easy for me because, I see 40 of my closest relatives at Thanksgiving and they all tell me about their working class experiences. But I know you all might not have access to that type of scientific data. So I ask you to do the initiatives that come close to you. I think that it's easy to think about doing a paid internship program for kids in underserved communities, to recruit from non-traditional sources like work source centers or community colleges, to reconsider your small business programs and make sure that they truly access those that need it. a lot of times I find that it's financing for your subcontractors that allows people not to have access, and for you all to consider a change to that. For those of us who are in government, I challenge us to go beyond the rhetoric and form a true working group that creates a tangible regional infrastructure plan, that we can set measurable deliverables and milestones to hold each other accountable. My one disclaimer on that is that I do want the infrastructure plan to start with the communities that have been overlooked the most, like the Sela community. Now, I know a few of you are probably sitting there like, I already do all this. We're ahead of the game. My company is ahead of the game. But I challenged you then to think of something more. Because achieving a zero-emission future will take all of us in this room working proactively through partnerships that may not be created today. I know if I think about the future, and not that anybody would be talking about like South Coast chairs in the future, but if they were, I'd like people to think that I was first and foremost a champion of equitable policies. And I probably told a lot of stories about my family. But if that's what I'm remembered for, then it was all worth it. Thank you for your time today, and enjoy the conference. I think we may have time for 1 or 2 questions, if burning questions, anybody out there.
Yeah, how do you go about, especially in your role, how do you go about trying to reconcile the social issues and jobs with the need to clean the air? Drayage trucks are going to have to go to new ones to electric in just a few weeks, and there are a lot of people that are saying they just can't afford to do that. So how do you deal with, those kind of inequities and cross purpose kind of goals?
Yeah, that's truly the hardest thing to think about, because of course we all want to transition to zero emissions. But when I think about that truck driver that I told you about, who couldn't even afford presents for the holidays, he already owns his diesel truck. How is he going to afford, and how long will it take for him to transition to electric? So our team and staff is here today. They do all the hard work. They have programs that they are seeking additional funding for just that. And even if we solve for a financing structure to help small businesses, the infrastructure is really not there. And I think it's high time to go beyond talking about it and for us to form coalitions to actually start to do something about it. So, one more before I go, and you all get to move on to the next thing. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you. Oh,
Jared, go down. Does the SC-AQMD give much thought or spend much time on tire pollution from
tire pollution and recycling of the materials?
Well, not the recycled material, the air pollution, the dust that's emitted from the tires.
Yeah, I mean, all the different particulate matters are part of our Clean Air Action Plan. It's not one of what I would call our direct source rules or rules in general that we're working on currently. But we're currently working on the ports and the railroad, and so we've moved into focusing on those issues right now. And staff is here today if you want to have a more technical discussion. I only had like 1 year of civil engineering, and that's all the technical studies I got in college. So, all right. Well, thank you for your time. Have a wonderful rest of the conference.